itself. The big engines looked anxiously at each other as the wind whistled round their engine shed. "Driver says it'll get worse before morning," said Henry gloomily. "I remember once when a wind like this blew down the signals at the junction," remarked James. "I had to wait for a man with flags to tell me when I could go. That made me very late." "Ah, but it's not so bad for you," said Gordon importantly. "Your trains don't matter so much, but I have got to pull the express. You know how the Fat Controller hates me to be late." "Never mind," put in Donald. "Perhaps the wind will be behind you, says you can go faster and be early. For once," he added cheerfully. Gordon snorted. "But it would be against me coming back," he objected. "It may change," suggested Douglas, but it didn't sound very hopeful. "Bah!" scoffed Gordon. "I just wish it would stop whistling around the shed and let an engine get some sleep." But it didn't, and the engines were all blurry-eyed and tired when their drivers came next morning. None of them wanted to come out and leave their warm sheds, but they each had a busy day ahead of them on the railway. Gordon backed onto the coaches of the express, which a shunting engine had taken to the platform for him. He felt cold in spite of his big fire. He waited sulkily for his passengers to climb aboard the train. At last a guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. Come along now, Gordon puffed impatiently to the coaches and moved slowly from the shelter of the station. Suddenly, as the wind hit him, he felt as if he had run into a wall. "Oof!" he exclaimed. "Never mind, Gordon," encouraged his driver. "Keep them moving." The worst part of the journey was near the junction, where the gale seemed to whip off the sea with increasing fury, blowing gusts of spray. Gordon hated it. At the station there was a small hut. The workmen used it for storing signal and train lamps and other small odds and ends. Today, as Gordon neared the station, he blinked with astonishment. The hut seemed to be walking across the platform. "I must be dreaming," he muttered to himself. But he wasn't, for the driver had seen it too. Quickly put on the brakes. "Whoa, Gordon," he exclaimed. "If we don't stop, we shall hit it." It was a near thing. Gordon slowed, but bit by bit the hut came closer. Finally, when Gordon was only a few yards off, the hut slid over the edge of the platform. It crashed onto the rails and lay still, right in its path. A moment later, with his buffers only a few inches away, Gordon stopped too. Porters, inspectors, and the station master all came running. "Well done, Gordon," said the station master. "I'm glad you've stopped. That might have been a nasty accident." Meanwhile, the porters eased the battered hut onto a trolley. Then, with much tugging and pulling, they moved it out of Gordon's way so that he could finish his journey. That day the express was late, but the station master explained things to the Fat Controller. As for Gordon, none of the other engines had ever seen a hut that walked by itself, and he enjoyed explaining what it looked like. Gale warning. A strong wind had been blowing all day, and that night it grew worse. Next morning the Fat Controller was eating toast and marmalade for his breakfast when his wife came in. She told him that some slates had been blown off the roof of their house in the night. "I'll get someone to replace them, my dear," he promised. "No use until this gale has died down, though. They'll blow off as fast as they put on." At the sheds, the engines had been teasing James. Once, in a wind like this, he had been spun round and round on a turntable, and had to wait for the wind to drop before he could be rescued. "Be careful, James," said Henry. "Mind you don't go on any turntables today." "Care for yourself," retorted James. "Make sure you don't stick in a tunnel when you need shelter." Henry didn't care. The engines laughed as they went to take their trains. Henry's first stop was at the station before the viaduct. "Be careful, Henry," warned the station master. "The wind on the viaduct is very fierce today." But Henry was lucky. The wind had dropped for a few moments just at the right time, and he brought his train safely over. The station beyond was in an exposed place too. Henry knew this, but he was so pleased about crossing the viaduct safely that he forgot. "Fancy worrying about a little bit of wind," he said to himself. "Now I've no more stops until the workstation. That's one in the buffers for old James." But as he rattled through the station, he saw something that made him whistle shrilly in horror. 100 yards in front, a tree was suddenly uprooted by the gale and crashed across the line. "Ooh!" groaned Henry as his brakes came on. Closer and closer he came, his wheels skidding on the rails. Henry shut his eyes. Nothing happened. Carefully, Henry looked again. He saw that he had stopped 6 inches from the fallen tree. He let off steam with relief as the guard came running to see what was the matter. Henry pushed the coaches back to the station, and the passengers all came to congratulate him on avoiding a nasty accident. "Well done, Henry," said James when he had heard. "Perhaps it's useful to be able to stick where you need, after all."